Well, it was May 30th, 2008. I was at the end of my junior year of high school. I was actually like in the middle of my final exams. I go to sleep one night. I have an exam the next morning. This is, during the school week. And I go to sleep that night at 4 in the morning. The lights turn on. There's two huge dudes standing at the foot of my bed saying, you're coming with us and we could do this the easier way or the hard way.
We got Chet Hanks. Chet, thanks for coming through, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the channel.
Thank you. It was cool hanging out with you and the Hoff twins and running that song that you're coming out with. It's going to be called
Clout Chasers.
Clout Chasers. It's a slapper, man. Are you going all in on the music now? Is that?
It's one of the things that I'm all in on. I'm kind of all in on a couple things.
How do you deal with fame? Is it something that you like? Does it feel awkward?
Growing up, I didn't feel famous per se about myself, but I was aware that I was attached to this fame. That's changed, but I still don't consider myself to be famous. Just the topic of fame in general is just kind of a can of worms, because if you really, depending on how far back we go, I was kind of born into a certain amount of fame that was, not of my own doing, just by proximity. So I've always witnessed, firsthand, the effects of fame. Not so much, on a person, but on other people who are infatuated with it.
Just as a fully evolved man, a guy who's gone through his own hero's journey, looking back at the concept of fame, did that trip you out when you were, just stubbing your toe on it?
That's the best way I could describe it, is that it just trips me out. It always tripped me out. The thing is that, as a child, you don't have anything else to compare it to. So children, whatever reality they're growing up with, no matter how abnormal it might be to someone else, that's what's normal to them. So it was always normal to me, but it did trip me out. But I didn't really realize how trippy it was until much later in life. Because, like I said at the time, this is your reality, so you just accept that as being normal.
You rebelled like every man goes through that phase where they're just, they're finding themselves, but you had a microscope on you. So
Right.
It was like everything you did was a big old affair, but we could pull 100 of our friends and they all went through their crazy phase. Drugs are a big part of your story. When did you start partaking in drugs and start that rebellious phase?
As a teenager, I was doing normal stuff like smoking weed and drinking. I didn't get into harder drugs until later in life, in my 20s.
And you mentioned when your mom caught you smoking weed, she freaked out.
Yeah, my parents are very old school.
Yeah.
They're all almost like, like the, reefer madness, like baby boomer generation, like that was like a very, very, very bad thing to them. That's their generation. That's how they were raised, So, yeah, that was like a big deal,
Your folks are super wholesome,
Very.
and Hollywood is filled with drug-fueled parties. And so hats off to your folks for going through Hollywood without getting all that smut on them from all these Hollywood parties and outrageous things going on in the city.
Right.
You talk about at a very critical part in your life at age 17, where you were literally snatched out of your bed to go to a rehab. I guess it was May 30th, 2008.
It wasn't a rehab. It was not a rehab. It was a wilderness program.
These wilderness programs are really a controversial subject matter right now. They're being sued left and right. And some people call it tough love. Others say it's an abuse of human rights. Describe the moment in time when you were literally plucked out of your bed and taken to St. George, Utah.
I go to sleep one night. I have an exam the next morning, during the school week, and I go to sleep that night at 4 a.m. The lights turn on. There's two huge dudes standing at the foot of my bed, saying, you're coming with us, and we could do this the easy way or the hard way. Those big dudes, they're called transporters. They don't actually work for the organization that you're going to. They're just a third party that just they snatch kids up and bring them there, and they're all like intimidating. But when they handed me off to the staff at the wilderness program, they were like, looked like hippies, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely gonna run from these ones, So I ran, tried to escape. That didn't go well because there was nowhere to run. I imagined I would run, hide behind a bush. They walk by, I sneak away. It was nothing like that. There was nowhere to hide. It was just this wide, big open street. And there was a police station on the corner of it. So as I was sprinting, and actually a cop car pulled up and whoop, whoop, cut me off. Cops got out, and it was over with. But I just collapsed on the ground because I was so exhausted. I mean, I was probably sprinting outright full-fledged for like a mile. So I actually just collapsed on the ground. I thought I was gonna die because I couldn't even breathe. I was just gasping for air, like. So they caught up with me. The staff came up, caught up with me, and they're like, "Oh, you're pretty fast, So they put me in restraints and walked me back up to get processed, and that's where it's like take a mug shot, full body search, squat and cough, all that, take away all your personal belongings, issue your gear. It's because I had attempted to run. Now I'm on run watch. So they put me in the back of a truck with two staff on each side, blindfolded me, drove me 2 hours in this truck, basically into the middle of nowhere in the high desert of southern Utah. You're blindfolded, so you have no idea where you are. You can't escape. And then you get there, and there's like 10 to 12 other kids, other kids your age. It was all boys, because we were in the juveniles group.
You're 17 at the time.
17, right. And then there's like 4 staff. The staff rotate out and in. The staff are out there for a week at a time. They rotate in and out. There's a therapist who's basically like your counselor, who's basically like the gatekeeper. He's the one in charge of how long you stay. He's the only liaison between you and your family. He's, analyzing you, picking you apart, basically. And you're out there. I honestly can say I didn't know whether I was going to be out there for 2 months or 2 years. I had no idea.
And just for our audience at home, your parents signed over legal guardian status to this
Right.
wilderness program.
That's what they do. So your parents have to sign over legal guardianship to these businesses, because that's what they are. They're privately run businesses. There's no state or federal oversight. There's zero regulation. These are just private, for-profit businesses. Okay, they're not they're not altruistic in any regard. They're not nonprofit business. They're not charitable organizations. They're for-profit, privately owned businesses, and their parents sign over legal guardianship to them. So the business, the entity is legally responsible for you and has legal basically ownership of you. And that's why so many of them are in Utah, because Utah has more laxed laws when it comes to juveniles and that sort of thing.
Have any kids died through the program?
Yeah, there's been a lot of deaths. No one died when I was there, but there was people that died in the same program that I was sent to. And I mean, there's numerous, there's numerous programs that are all basically the same thing. They have different names, but it's basically the same kind of structure. There's little minor differences. The one I went to was called Second Nature Entrada. There's been kids that have died there, mostly with either heat exhaustion or falling off a cliff or fucking getting bit by a rattlesnake. That's the main thing that they tell you to watch out for, is rattlesnakes, because they're everywhere and they are extremely poisonous. And we're so remote that it's going to take at least a couple hours to get to the nearest hospital. And I remember thinking, well, what happens if someone gets, I remember asking the staff, I was like, what happens if someone gets bit by a rattlesnake? And they're like, don't. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys have an antidote or something, right? And they're like, no. if someone gets bit, how long does it take to get to the nearest hospital? And they're like, I mean, it'll be maybe 2 or 3 hours. And I'm like, well, how long does it take to die from a rattlesnake bite? And they're like, 45 minutes.
Right.
So I'm like, so what happens if someone gets bit and they just say, don't get bit, you know?
Man. So you're dropped in this meat grinder, right? This is nature. You're out there with some cold people. It's a different methodology of dealing with rehab, and you're kicking the dope.
Well, I wasn't on drugs at that point.
You weren't? Okay.
No,
you were
I
just
wasn't on drugs.
a renegade, rebellious
I was just
state.
rebellious.
Yeah.
I was just I was smoking weed and drinking, but I wasn't on any hardcore drugs, and I was just rebellious, you know?
Right.
I was just, you know, just doing little delinquent shit because I wanted to be I wanted to be bad, you know?
You mentioned there's an earth phase and a fire phase and a water phase, and it's all this hierarchy of earning your right to go home, basically. Is that essentially what the wilderness program's about?
Right. So when you first get there, you're on earth phase, which means you haven't earned the privilege yet to speak to the group or be spoken to. So you just have to sit by yourself for like a week, like by a tree. They're just like, okay, take your shit, go to that tree and just sit there. And you're just sitting there like from sunrise to sundown, just not talking to anyone, just basically reflecting on the fucked up situation that you're in. You're more so just panicking because it's like you have no idea what's, you know.
This is real.
Your freedom has been taken away, and you don't know how long it's going to be taken away, and you don't know what you have to do to, you know, regain it, you know. And you're at the mercy of these people who get to decide, you know. Your fate is no longer in your hands, basically.
And you turn 18 in the program, and now you go to the adult version of this program.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the therapist, Charlie, was a sadistic, sick motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he really played with your head. And
yeah. You get there and you realize like you're fucked, okay? And that, you know, these people get to decide when you get to leave. So you might as well just like play ball, you know, and like be compliant. Now there's some kids that like would took it a step further, and they would basically be like a snitch and be like telling on people and doing all that to like gain favor with the staff, which I, you know, detested, and I don't want any part of that, because like they said, there's different stages. There's earth phase, fire phase, water phase, and fucking air phase, right? You're on earth phase when you get there. Eventually you get on fire phase. When you're on fire phase, now you're a part of the group and you can talk to everybody in the group. You've learned the privilege to be spoken to, and you can speak, and you got to do the chores and all that. But beyond that, they said it's optional, right? They said it's optional. Then you get on water phase or air phase and you get better privileges. The main privilege for water phase was you get a fucking chair. Okay, it had this stupid little chair called a Crazy Creek. It was like a fold-out fucking chair, right? And you just sat in it, and you could fucking lean back in it, and you can rock back in that. And that was like a big fucking deal, because you're out there for months, and you're just sitting on your fucking ass in the dirt, right? So your back is killing you, right? You just want to be able to lean back a little bit. So that was like a big deal if you got the fucking water phase and you could earn that chair, because it was like
chair.
It was like it was like a life changer out there. Okay. But in order to do that and be on a water phase, you had to be a leader, and you had to and being a leader is like bullshit. It's basically like turning on your own, like turning on the kids to like side with the staff, you know what I mean? And no one, you know, and trying to act like, come on guys, like let's do our chores better, you know what I mean? Like, so when I got there, they told me, they said the majority of kids never get to water phase. You don't have to make it to water phase in order to leave.
But that was a little okie doke.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They said you don't have to make it to water phase to leave. The majority of kids leave without ever making water phase. So I said, okay, great. Then I don't fuck the chair. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna, I won't try to even make an attempt to be on water phase, because I'm not gonna fucking end up like these kids and like snitching on them and doing all this shit, right? Well, little did I know that they were keeping me there the whole time and writing back to my parents saying, he doesn't care about being on water phase. I think we need to keep him here longer. You know what I mean? So eventually I was there for so long that basically like, they couldn't not keep me. They couldn't not give me the water phase, even though I tried to stretch it out for so long. And I never snitched on anyone. I did it my own way. I never did any of that lame shit. I just fulfilled all the requirements that you had to like check off of like make 15 fires, I can do this, like wilderness like survival skills that I ended up doing. So I was eventually they were like, okay, like he's done everything we asked him to do, so we got to give him water phase. And then I got the water phase. When they gave me the water phase, the chair, they told me, now we're expecting you to be a leader and we're expecting you to hold people accountable. But I didn't do any of that shit, and they busted me back down to fire phase in a week.
But I can't wrap my head around water phase where they wanted to promote a snitching culture. How is that?
Because it's about they don't want any camaraderie amongst the kids. Once you were in the group and you could talk to people, but only within earshot. So what that means is that you could only speak to somebody if a staff could hear what you were saying. So if you just went off to someone and said, yo, fuck this shit, I fucking hate it, then you would get busted down and you get put on isolation, which is like being back on Earth phase where you can't speak to anybody. So anytime the staff had to, circle up, which they did all the time to like discuss what the next thing they're gonna do is, everybody else just had to sit there in silence. So they want it to be so that it's the staff, the kids can't form any sort of brotherhood or camaraderie against the staff, like to like mutiny against them, I guess, right? So they're trying to get people to do the staff's bidding, so that they can have more influence in the group.
You police your own community and you turn against your fellow group. Now, did you establish some great bonds with some of these guys?
Yeah, some of them. One of them I'm still really close to today. I just saw him a couple weeks ago, my boy Asher. But the rest of them, I'll always remember them. Got nothing but love for them. Some of them, not all of them. But honestly, most of them, they fell off the face of the earth. I don't know what happened to them. Some of them have died. Some of them are strung out really bad on drugs. Who knows what the fuck they're doing or where they're at. I don't know, but I wish them the best.
And the funny thing is your parents were sold a bill of goods that, Chet's going to do zip lining, and there's breakfast. And so they were okey doked too. Yeah. They didn't know.
Because you don't have any communication with them, right? So your only communication is letters. And they look through and redact the letters. And the bill of goods that they're selling your parents is a lie. When I got out, I looked on the website. And the website was these pictures of like these smiling kids, like rock climbing and river rafting and like, you know what I mean? Like, and it was just a lie. We didn't do any of that. All we did was just live in the dirt, hike with fucking 80-pound packs, and do fucking fake ass, just weaponized therapeutic groups that were just it was therapy that was weaponized against us.
That's wild.
And manual labor. We did manual labor, forced, which is basically slave labor if you think about it. Yeah. Because we weren't getting paid.
Weren't you removing barbed wire?
But they were profiting from it because we were so remote. The only people that like own land out there are like these massive, just stretches of land which are like owned by like cattle ranchers. And the cattle ranchers would pay the programs to get us to go through and do labor. Like what we were doing was fucking getting rid of just miles and miles of barbed wire fence. One rancher had a fence he wanted to get rid of, full of barbed wire, miles of it. We're just going through there with clippers and gloves on and just clipping the wire, foiling it up and putting it to the side. All day.
How long did those days feel? Just
let me tell you something. A day feels like a fucking eternity out there, and then a week feels like a month, and a month feels like a fucking year, because there's no you're completely cut off from society. You have no form of entertainment whatsoever. You don't even have music. All you hear is the silence of the fucking wilderness. You can't even speak to somebody in private. Okay, everything you do is under this group setting or completely alone and isolated. There's no music. There's books. We could read books, but the books had to be given to us and approved by our therapist. So he said, "Can I read this book?" He's like, "No, you're not going to read that book. I'll give you this book." And it'd be like some like bullshit like self-help book. You know what I mean?
Chicken soup for the soul.
You couldn't even have like a book just like as a form of entertainment, like a novel just to like get lost in. You know what I mean? And just distract yourself. Everything was like this like weaponized like therapy, And so yeah, that lack of connection to the outside world and just anything to distract your mind with or just to, fill your mind with, is gone, right? So it's so fucking boring, man. Like the boredom, the monotony is like maddening,
Right. It sounds like it.
It's mad because you can't even entertain yourself with stories, like with your other fellow, kids there. You can't even just shoot the shit. We couldn't even shoot the shit because without, like I said, if you were speaking out of earshot, you get put on separates, and you get put on isolation, and you know that you're just adding time on. You know that you're just any infraction or things that you don't comply with, they're just adding time on for that. So like at a certain point, you're like, okay, I guess all I have to do is just comply, and just hope that I can leave soon. But little did I know that just by complying, they're writing home to your parents, and you think you're complying. I guess this has got to be money in the bank for my exit. Right? Because I'm being compliant? Wrong. Because just even if you're complying, they're writing home to your parents and saying, he's just not getting honest. He's not being real. He's not opening up. Chet hasn't really opened up yet, and we just don't really know. He's not getting real. He's not being raw. So that's extending your stay, and you don't even know that yet. So what happened to me was I complied for a long time until I realized that it wasn't getting me anywhere and that they were going to keep me longer which this dude Charlie did. I had already been there for longer than anybody had been there. When I got there, every person that was already there had already got sent home. So I was number one in the group. I was the veteran. I had been there longer than anybody, and I've been compliant for months. So I get my meeting, my once a week meeting with Charlie. Charlie Carlin is his name, Charles Carlin, and this is a guy who you're not gonna open up to. You know what I mean? He's. You think does this sound like a safe environment to start opening up? You know what I mean? When you're just looked at as basically scum, and have no rights, right? So. He asked me, he gets in my face, honestly, and he's like, why don't you just really tell me for once what the fuck is on your mind? What's really on your mind, Chet? Why don't you just fucking be real for once? You want to know what's on my mind? He's like, yeah, I really want to know. And I'm like, okay, check this out. The same thing that's been on my mind every second of every day that I've been out here this whole fucking time. When the fuck am I getting out? And he goes, what makes you think you're getting out of here anytime soon? And I had already been there longer than anyone else. So at that point, I snapped. I basically snapped. I said, fuck being compliant. I just said, fuck everybody. I was cussing out staff. I was just basically, you couldn't tell me shit, and I didn't give a fuck. And
they're like, Chet, you're back to fire face.
Yeah. As soon as I got there, basically, I was sent on a solo, which is like where they take you and they blindfold you and they lead you in the circles in the middle of nowhere, and then they take your blindfold off and you're completely by yourself in the middle of nowhere. And they say, this is your solo, and you have to stay, don't leave this area. And they leave you out there for like a week by yourself, right? No notebook, no book to read, nothing to entertain yourself with, just fucking deafening silence, for like a week. The main thing I was reflecting about was just, I would have given anything. I would have given up all the fucking partying or all this stuff, hanging out with my friends and all that just to like have dinner with my family. You know what I'm saying? It really made you appreciate just.
You missed them.
Yeah, my family, and feeling really guilty for being so rebellious and everything. But and then I had another moment later on, which was a pivotal moment of my life.
So, Chet, describe that other pivotal moment when you were out there alone in the wilderness, bro, stewing in your own thoughts.
Yeah, so like I said, like after I just snapped and I was no longer being compliant, I was just basically just like full of rage. And one day they're like, hey, we're going to do something different today. And I'm like, oh, really? What are we going to do? And they're like, we're going to go on a hike. And I'm like, oh, really? A hike? That's different? That all we do is hike. And they're like, no, we're going to go on a day hike, so you don't need to bring your pack. We're just going to hike to the top of this mountain. And there was like very few mountains in this area. It's all just the desert. There's not much to look at. It's not picturesque, it's just like tree, shrub, dirt, that's it. So we hiked to the top of this mountain, and as we're hiking up the mountain, I'm just like so pissed off. Like it's like each step I'm taking, I'm just getting angrier. I was just at my wit's end. And when we get to the top of the mountain, they say, okay, now you can break off and like have lunch and whatever. So I actually just took a second. Everyone kind of just sat down and started eating, but I like took a second just to look at this view because, we've been living in this desert for months, but I've never actually seen it from, high up. So I looked at this view and it was just absolutely incredible. And I started just getting this like weird feeling. So I went and I didn't go with the group. I just went and sat on the edge of this cliff and just sat down and was just looking out at this view. And as I was looking out on it, it like struck me that this was like one of the most miraculous things I'd ever seen, because for as far as the eye could see, at 360 degrees, there wasn't a single, imprint of humanity or civilization. I mean, you're so remote, there's not a road or a cabin or a truck or like a little fucking box like for hiking donations. I mean, you are out there in just pure, vast, empty wilderness. And I realized I had never even seen anything like this before, in just absolute silence, And I was just hit by this wave of emotion that was so powerful. It was the most powerful feeling I had ever experienced ever in that point of my life. And the emotion, it was like beyond words, but like the best way I could describe it, it was like feeling every emotion at once. All this stuff that had been bottled up inside of me just hit me at once. And it was like, it was the anger and the pain, but also like the hope and like the joy. Like I just basically like, at that moment, like realized like, okay, like, this experience is going to be over eventually. And I was just so overcome with emotion. I just like started bawling, right? Like I had never bawled like this in my life, like uncontrollable crying, but like also not just like pain, but also like joy. It was just, it was like beyond words. And that's the moment that I believed God came into my life, because it just felt like I was being touched by the hand of God at that very moment. It was the moment that God revealed himself to me. And I just knew at that moment with utter certainty that just the reality and the truth of God's existence.
So it was a deeply divine moment in your life.
Very exactly, the most pivotal moment of my life. And it's interesting just because it was a culmination of all the negative emotions that were just released and then filled in and purified by something greater.
Did you feel a sense of humility come over you?
Yes.
You felt small, but you felt connected to
Connected.
everything.
Yes, like exactly, because just looking out at that vast, untouched wilderness, which is just God's creation, feeling so humbled by that, but also just completely and totally connected to it.
Have you ever had the itch to go back there under different circumstances, like go do like a guy's trip or bring a date out there? Or has that crossed your mind?
It's crossed my mind, but I've never done it.
Did you set a record for the longest guy in that program?
There was one kid that was there longer than me.
Oh, jeez.
And he was there for like 9 months.
Wow.
And he was in my group. This kid was an absolute psychopath.
You can't fix crazy, can you?
I wouldn't be surprised if he's like a serial killer now. This kid was out of his fucking mind.
Like burning ants and shit like that.
He's a very sadistic, sick kid. And it's funny because he was the youngest kid in our group. He was only 13 years old. Okay, he was 13 years old. His name was Michael. And he was, he was 13, but he looked like he was 8. You know, he looked like a young child, very small, very tiny. And he was the most evil, probably one of the most inherently evil people I've ever met.
Like he slept with one eye open. Like you didn't know.
I mean, he couldn't do anything to us physically, but every single kid in that group wanted to hurt him.
Man, that's crazy. So 15 weeks of basically torture. You had a few good epiphanies, a few good moments in time. Did you have stable footing as it relates to sobriety, or you were like, I'm going to tear this motherfucker?
I had no intention of being sober, and it was a trip because I had just been in that whole experience for like a year and a half, and boom, now I'm free and I'm in college.
Now, after college, where did you end up going?
So after college, like I said, acting was in my family. It's the family business. I studied it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to LA and I'm gonna be an actor, follow in the family footsteps. Mind you, all my friends are, kids I grew up with, they're going off to become, investment banking, going into finance,
Counting,
real estate. So they all have like steady, like stable jobs and lives like set out for them. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna be an actor, wait around for auditions, get rejected a bunch, not make any money. But I get back and they're like, look, my parents are like, look, you're not gonna live with us, and you got to get a job. So you go figure out your shit. So for several years, I worked some really shitty jobs I fucking hated.
Were you still partying during this time, or
this is when it really escalated, right?
Okay.
Because it's like I just had the time of my life in college, started experimenting with little drugs here and there, Molly, Coke, like when all that stuff came out. And then now I get back to real life. I'm out of college. All my friends have these stable lives. My life is not stable at all. I'm working these menial jobs, hating my life pretty much. So that's when the partying turned from just like something fun to like me trying to escape my reality. And that's when it really got bad. You're like, okay, is this gonna be my life, or am I gonna do something about it? So that's when I got sober. It was also my daughter was born, so I figured out I was going to be a father. So that was the catalyst for me to be like, okay, I gotta get clean. And I got clean the first time. I was clean for 5 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was clean for 5 years, then I relapsed for a year and a half, and now I've been clean and sober from everything for 2.5 years.
Good for you, Chet. Do you feel you're operating at the resonance you need to be at, that harmonic resonance right now?
Yes.
Yeah. I could sense it about you, Chet.
I've felt that way for the past 9 months. Yeah. For the past 9 months straight, I've felt that nonstop. And it's a big shift to me because, my emotions and my self-regulating used to be all over the place. One day I'd be ups and downs. My life was just my mental, the state of my mind, of my emotions, of my being in general was just always a fucking roller coaster. One second I could be on top of the world, and the next second I could feel fucking like I want to kill myself. And I could fluctuate between those multiple times in a day. Or sometimes I'd be riding high for a couple weeks or months, and then I'd be in a terrible depression for weeks or months. Or sometimes I'd just be so over the place that I'm going back and forth multiple times a day, So there was just never any stability. But for the past 9 months straight, I've just felt it's just this like metaphysical, energetic thing that I've just felt completely, balanced within my own, essence. And let me just say that is not to say that like I'm some saint, right? Or that I'm because that's not what it is. And I think that's a common misconception. I think when people talk about these like kind of like energetic spiritual things, there's a connotation that assumes like it's this like kumbaya, very like peaceful or, whatever, people imagine of like just this like hippy dippy kind of, kumbaya, type of thing, and that's not what it is. That's not what it is. It's about just radical self-acceptance, just embracing the totality of who you are, both light and dark. I feel like the solution the common misconception is that people just want to embrace everything that's light and positive and just completely ignore the dark, right? But that is actually, that's a lie. That's not the key to actual like balance and, you know, esoteric harmony. Carl Jung talks about this a lot. He talks a lot about embracing you know, acknowledging the shadow self, where basically, you know, when I say, you know, like darkness, it's basically the shadow self. There's the ego and there's the subconscious within a person, right? The ego is the things that they like to appear to be. The subconscious or the shadow self is the things that they, you know, they don't want to acknowledge about themselves, the things that they might not like about themselves, that they don't want to look at. So I think this whole like this whole spiritual movement of like, you know, people, you know, doing sound baths and like doing all, they're only acknowledging like one side of it, right? But what true spiritual balance is just acknowledging the totality of all of your entire being, right? And this is exactly what Carl Jung talks about, and this is exactly what they talked about in the ancient times. This is exactly what all the mystery schools spoke about in ancient Greece and ancient Egypt. This has been, you know, this has been something that, you know, has been a topic since, you know, the dawn of humanity, basically.
How important is working out to you in your life? Is it a form of therapy? Does it get all that aggression out? Because I know fitness is a big part of your life now.
I mean, I just think it just has to do with the concept of it's better to be a warrior and a gardener in a garden than a gardener in a war. You know, if you're a man, why wouldn't you want to be prepared for any situation? Because when a life-changing situation happens, it's never expected, right? It's always going to come out of nowhere, and that can happen to anybody, right? So if you're a man, and especially if you have people that you need to be here for, that you need to be here to nurture and protect, then why wouldn't you want to be physically capable of, you know,
right,
not allowing some lunatic's will to trump your existence? Because there's a lot of crazy people out there.
A lot of crazy people, man. Where do you think America's going, man? Like the direction it's going. Do you feel we're in Rome end of days, or are you hopeful for the future?
I would like to say that I don't feel like it's the fall of Rome, but that's definitely what it feels like. Because Rome collapsed from within. It rotted from within, and that's exactly what's happening now. I mean, am I concerned? Yeah, I'm concerned. I'm concerned not just for my daughter, for everyone. You know, my main concern is the war on the lack of free speech for my generation and for everyone's generation. Okay, you can utilize social media now to have your own streams of income, so you don't have to go work a 9 to 5. Who doesn't want that? Okay, so people who are content creators or, you know, have podcasts or any line of work, honestly, any industry, because there's consequences in any industry no matter what you do, but especially on social media, you can only share opinions from one side. And if you share opinions from the other side, you get penalized, you get demonetized, you get shadow banned, you get banned, deleted. I think that's wrong. What interests do social media platforms have in only promoting one side of the argument? Why has it all of a sudden become so restrictive for dialogue to even be possible? Social media is all based upon one side. The implications of that are massive.
And who am I, or who are you to be the arbiter of that?
Well, what they're trying to be is the arbiter of truth itself, which is inherently goes against the very nature of truth. Sometimes the truth is maybe skews one way or the other, but most of the time I think it lies pretty much in the middle, right? But now the way it's set up is that you can't even hear the other side's argument. And if you voice the other side's argument, you're punished. Now good luck fucking providing for your family. Good luck with your stream of income, shutting that down. You better go work on a fucking oil rig or something and collect a paycheck. Because you can't participate in now this new social media way to make a living and earn a living for yourself. It's just clear that like the establishment it has its own plans. Right. The establishment has its own plans and agendas, and they're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to justify it, and they'll market it to you in a certain way, but that may or may not be completely, in relation to the truth or not.
And growing up in Hollywood, again, you've seen how the donuts are made, right? Do you believe Hollywood has become the high priest of not only our culture, but the culture that we export to the world?
It's definitely, I think that the function of Hollywood and the media, which are basically one and the same, is just shaping people's minds. That's really its utility, to shape the minds of the masses. You see, the thing is that nothing is just one way, right? So although media and Hollywood can be used to shape people's minds, there's also the truth that there's still people just trying to create art, right? And that's the medium that they do it through, is Hollywood. People have a story, it's a creation of art also. So just like anybody has to do with anything, like everything needs to be looked at like with a grain of salt, and I think everything should just, and not just Hollywood, just any topic should be considered just with your own common sense, not take into account what your own common sense tells you and what is being fed to you, instead of people being able to interpret their own reality based upon what resonates as truthful in the core of their being, and also with what the facts are,
right,
of what they know to be true or false.
No, you've done a lot.
Because what the facts are these days has never been more ambiguous, because everybody's got their own facts.
And their own spin.
Everybody's got their own facts. You could say, this is a fact and here's the proof, and one person says, no, that proof is a lie, here's my proof. So no one really fucking knows. The ultimate truth is God. The ultimate truth is that this world is not the kingdom of heaven. It was never meant to be the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is not of this world, and this world is not of the kingdom of heaven. I think that reality, consciousness, the universe, the cosmos, life, is all one entity. And that entity is God, source, whatever you want to call it. There's only one thing happening. There's only one thing occurring. It's always just been one thing. It's always just been one entity. There is no division at all. All division is an illusion. Any division that we feel is an illusion of our minds. The truth is that there's only one entity, that life itself and all that it encompasses is that entity itself, and that there is actually no separation. Obviously, I'm you, you're me, we're two different people. Yes, there's like paradoxes within it, right? Because there's different layers of being. But on the grand scheme, there's only one thing. There's only one entity that all other forms of it are a part of, and the only thing we actually are here to do, the only thing that we have to do, is just simply exist, is just be. I think a lot of people think that, like, people can interpret life as like a test, or that the meaning of life is to be altruistic, become more purified, or accomplish this, or help whatever. whatever, and that's all great. But I think that the truth is that the only thing that we actually have to do is just simply be. Because what does that mean? What does it mean to just be? What does that actually mean, right? What is the nature of my being? How do I interpret that? The more the individual can make sense of the nature of his own being, the more that all those things, those altruistic things, will just naturally fall into place.
Chet, how can our audience tap in with you? Do you interact with a lot of your
Yeah,
audience?
sure. You can follow my YouTube channel, The Chet Hanks Show. That's Hanks spelled normally. And then my Instagram is Chet Hanks, but Hanks spelled with the X.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming through, Chet. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for running your story on
Likewise.
her. Yeah, right on.
Thank you.
Man.